The crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the ballroom as hundreds of cameras turned toward the stage in New Jersey. Eleanor Whitmore stood at the podium, her champagne-colored gown catching the light, her father's proud smile visible from the front row. The fundraising gala had drawn everyone who mattered in the city, their donations already exceeding $12 million. This was supposed to be her moment, the triumphant speech about surviving the impossible, about second chances and gratitude. Eleanor's hands gripped the podium edge. Her prepared notes sat ignored before her. She scanned the crowd, past the senators and CEOs, past the society columnists and her father's business partners, until her eyes found the security guard near the service entrance. She knew what she had to do. "There's someone here my father never wanted me to see again," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the polite applause. The room fell silent. Cameras zoomed closer. Her father's smile fractured. "Someone who gave me everything and asked for nothing. Someone who was erased from this story because he didn't fit the narrative my family wanted to tell." The security guard stepped forward, uncertain. Eleanor raised her hand to stop him. 9 months ago, I should have died. But I'm standing here tonight because of someone you've never heard of. Someone my father paid to disappear." The ballroom erupted in confused murmurs. Bernard Whitmore rose from his seat, his face darkening. Eleanor's mother clutched her pearls. Every phone in the room began recording. "His name is Marcus Thompson, and I need you all to know what he did." 9 months earlier, Marcus Thompson sat in the free clinic waiting room, his younger sister's hand in his. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering occasionally. The chairs were cracked plastic, the magazines were 3 years old, and the clock on the wall had stopped at 2:47. Marcus was 17, about to turn 18 in 2 weeks. He'd already worked 6 hours at the grocery store before school, and his shift at the gas station started in 3 hours. Sleep existed somewhere in the margins. Marcus Thompson. A nurse called his name without looking up from her clipboard. His mother hadn't been able to take off work. She worked 2 jobs herself. One at a laundry service, one cleaning office buildings at night. His father had died 4 years ago, a heart attack at 39, leaving behind medical bills that still hadn't been paid. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the South Side, where gunshots occasionally interrupted dinner and where Marcus had learned to sleep through sirens. The blood drive had seemed simple enough. Donate blood, get $25 and some orange juice. $25 meant groceries for 3 days if he was careful. But the technician had noticed something during the routine screening. "Your blood type is rare," the doctor told him now, in the small examination room that smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. "AB negative. Less than 1% of the population." Marcus nodded, unsure why this mattered. "There's a patient at University Hospital. A young woman about your age. She's in end-stage renal failure. Without a transplant, she has maybe 2 months." The doctor paused, studying Marcus's face. "You're a potential match. Not just for blood. For a kidney." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at his sister, who was only 14, who needed him to help with homework and walk her home from school. He looked at his hands, calloused from stocking shelves and pumping gas, hands that his mother needed to help pay rent. "What happens if I say yes?" Marcus asked. The doctor explained everything. The surgery would take 4 to 6 hours. Recovery would be 6 to 8 weeks. There were risks. Infection, bleeding, blood clots, damage to other organs. Long-term risks included high blood pressure, reduced kidney function in the remaining kidney. His physical capacity might be permanently affected. Heavy lifting could become dangerous. His future health was uncertain. "You're young," the doctor said. "You have your whole life ahead of you. This is not a decision to make lightly." "What happens if I say no?" Marcus asked. "She dies. They've exhausted the donor list. Her blood type makes finding a match nearly impossible. You might be her only chance." Marcus sat in silence. His sister squeezed his hand. Through the thin walls, he could hear someone crying in the next room, could hear the constant beep of medical equipment, the hurried footsteps of nurses responding to emergencies. This building was full of people who needed things they couldn't afford, who made impossible choices every single day. "Can I meet her?" Marcus asked. Before I decide. University Hospital existed in a different world. The floors gleamed. The walls were painted calming colors. There were flowers in the lobby and a coffee shop that sold $7 lattes. Marcus felt underdressed in his grocery store uniform, aware of every stain, every frayed edge. The nurses looked at him differently here, their smiles polite but distant, their eyes making quick assessments. Eleanor Whitmore's room was on the 8th floor, in the private wing where visitors had to be cleared by security. Her father's money had bought her a space that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. There were fresh flowers on every surface. A private bathroom. A sitting area. Eleanor herself sat propped up in bed, connected to a dialysis machine, reading a book. She looked up when Marcus entered, her face pale but her eyes sharp and alert. She was beautiful in the way that wealth allowed, with perfect teeth and carefully maintained hair, but the illness had carved shadows under her eyes and made her skin translucent. "You must be Marcus," she said, setting down her book. It was a college-level philosophy text. "They told me you wanted to meet before deciding." Marcus nodded, suddenly unsure what to say. "How did you talk to someone who was dying? How did you talk to someone whose father owned half the city?" "I don't want you to feel pressured," Eleanor continued. "This is a huge decision. You don't owe me anything. Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, "Of course. Are you scared?" Eleanor blinked, surprised by the question. People didn't usually ask her about feelings. They asked about her father's business, about her college plans, about the charities she supported. But no one asked if she was scared. "Terrified," she admitted. "I'm 18 years old. I should be finishing my senior year, worrying about prom and college applications. Instead, I'm hooked up to this machine for 4 hours a day, watching my body shut down piece by piece. So yes, I'm scared all the time." Marcus understood fear. Fear of eviction notices. Fear of empty refrigerators. Fear of his mother's exhausted face. Fear of his sister walking home alone. Fear was a constant companion in poverty. "If I do this," Marcus said slowly, "what happens after?" "You mean payment?" Eleanor asked. "I mean, do I just go back to my life? Do we just never speak again?" Eleanor considered this. "I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. I suppose it depends." "On what?" "On whether you want to know the person you saved." Something passed between them in that moment. Something neither could name. It wasn't attraction or friendship or pity. It was recognition. Two people standing at opposite ends of the economic spectrum, both trapped by circumstances beyond their control, both trying to find meaning in an indifferent world. "I'll do it," Marcus said. "If you're watching this, drop a comment below. Tell me what you would do in Marcus's position. Would you give up part of yourself to save a stranger? Let's talk about it." The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Marcus had to sign more paperwork than he'd ever seen in his life. Consent forms. Liability waivers. Medical history documents. The hospital's legal team made sure every possible outcome was documented, every risk acknowledged. Marcus's mother cried when she signed the parental consent form. He was still 17, still technically a minor for another week. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, holding his face in her hands. "Baby, you don't owe these people anything." "I know, Mama," Marcus said. "But if I can help, shouldn't I?" The morning of the surgery, Marcus woke up at 4 a.m. in the pre-op room. The hospital had provided everything he needed, but he felt exposed in the thin gown, vulnerable in a way he rarely allowed himself to feel. A nurse inserted an IV line. An anesthesiologist explained what would happen. Doctors came by to mark the surgical site with a permanent marker, drawing lines on his side like he was a map. Eleanor was in the next room. They'd coordinated the surgeries to happen simultaneously. Marcus's kidney would be removed laparoscopically, transported to the adjacent operating room, and transplanted into Eleanor's body. The whole process would take most of the day.
You ready? A nurse asked, checking his vitals one last time. Marcus nodded. He wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready for this? But ready or not, he'd made his choice. The last thing he remembered was counting backward from 10. He made it to 7 before the world went dark. Marcus woke up in pain. Not the sharp, immediate pain of injury, but the deep, grinding ache of trauma. His side burned. Every breath hurt. The morphine helped, but it also made everything hazy and distant. Nurses checked on him every hour. His mother sat beside his bed, her hand resting on his arm, her face lined with worry. The surgery went well. A doctor told him on the second day, "No complications. Your kidney is functioning perfectly in the recipient." "And Eleanor?" Marcus asked, his voice rough from the breathing tube. "Stable. She's responding well to the transplant. You saved her life." The words should have felt triumphant, but Marcus just felt tired. His body had been cut open, rearranged, and sewn back together. Part of him now lived in someone else. The philosophy of it was too large to contemplate through the fog of pain medication. Eleanor sent a note on the third day. It was delivered by a nurse, written on expensive stationery that felt almost offensive in its luxury. The handwriting was elegant, each letter perfectly formed. "Marcus, I don't have words adequate to thank you. You gave me a future. I promise I won't waste it. Get well soon. Eleanor." It was kind. It was appropriate. It was also distant, the sort of message you'd send to a valued service provider. Marcus folded it carefully and tucked it in his bag. On the 5th day, Bernard Whitmore came to visit. Bernard Whitmore was everything Marcus had imagined and more. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's mother made in 6 months. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His watch was Swiss and complicated. He carried himself with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been denied, never been made to wait. "Marcus Thompson," Bernard said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, calculated to convey power without being overtly aggressive. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done for my daughter." Marcus shook his hand, acutely aware of how he must look. Pale, weak, still connected to various monitors and drains. "How are you feeling?" Bernard asked, though his tone suggested this was a formality rather than genuine interest. "Sore," Marcus said honestly. "Of course. The doctors tell me you'll make a full recovery." Bernard pulled up a chair, but somehow made it seem like Marcus was the visitor. "I wanted to discuss next steps." "Next steps?" "Yes. Obviously, the hospital bills are covered. We've taken care of all medical expenses, both for the surgery and any follow-up care you might need." Bernard paused, pulling out an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Additionally, I'd like to offer you compensation for your time and sacrifice." He placed the envelope on Marcus's bedside table. It was thick, clearly containing cash. "There's $10,000 there," Bernard continued. "I think you'll find it's more than generous considering the circumstances. It should help with any lost wages during your recovery and give you a cushion moving forward." $10,000. Marcus stared at the envelope. It was more money than he'd ever seen in one place. It could pay off his father's medical debt. It could cover rent for months. It could give his mother a break from working herself to death. "There is one condition," Bernard said, and Marcus's stomach tightened. "My daughter is in a fragile state right now. Physically, yes, but also emotionally. The transplant was traumatic. She needs time to recover and adjust. I think it would be best for everyone if you maintained appropriate boundaries." "Appropriate boundaries," Marcus repeated. "Yes. No contact. No visits. No social media interactions. I've drafted a simple agreement." Bernard produced another document, several pages thick. "It's straightforward. You agree to respect Eleanor's privacy, and in return, you receive the compensation and have all your medical expenses covered. It protects both of you." Marcus looked at the papers, then at the envelope of cash. Something felt wrong about this, transactional in a way that made his skin crawl. But $10,000. His mother's tired face. His sister's worn-out shoes. The past due notices stacked on their kitchen counter. What if Eleanor wants to stay in touch? Marcus asked. Bernard's smile didn't reach his eyes. My daughter is grateful, of course, but she needs to focus on her recovery and getting back to her life. I'm sure you understand. You both come from very different worlds. It's better for everyone if we acknowledge that reality now rather than creating complications later. Different worlds. The words hung in the air like an insult. Marcus thought about Eleanor in her private room with fresh flowers and $7 lattes. He thought about his own room, shared with his sister, where they'd taped cardboard over the broken window and used blankets to block the draft. Sign the agreement, Bernard said, his voice hardening slightly. Take the money. Get on with your life. This doesn't have to be complicated unless you make it complicated. Marcus stared at the papers for a long moment. Then he picked up the pen. Hit that like button if you're still with me. We're just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe where this goes. Recovery was harder than Marcus expected. The surgical wounds healed within weeks, but the fatigue lingered for months. His body had to adjust to functioning with one kidney. He tired easily. Heavy lifting left him exhausted. His boss at the grocery store gave him lighter duties for a while, but eventually made it clear that he needed Marcus at full capacity or not at all. Marcus returned to school 6 weeks after surgery. His teachers were sympathetic but firm. He'd missed significant material. He had to stay late for tutoring, working overtime to catch up on chemistry and calculus while also working his shifts at the gas station. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. His mother watched him with worried eyes. You're working too hard, baby. Your body needs rest. We need rent money, Marcus said simply. It was true. The $10,000 had disappeared faster than expected. His father's medical debt had consumed most of it. The rest went to past due bills and keeping food on the table. They were back to paycheck within 3 months, as if nothing had changed. Eleanor's recovery made the news. The local papers ran stories about the miraculous transplant, about the Whitmore family's gratitude, about the anonymous donor who'd saved a young woman's life. Anonymous. Marcus read the articles on his phone during breaks at work, feeling a strange disconnect. He'd given part of himself, permanently altered his health and future, and received nothing but anonymity and a quickly depleted bank account. He didn't blame Eleanor. She hadn't asked for any of this, but he couldn't stop wondering what she was doing, how she was feeling, whether the kidney was working properly. It was a strange intimacy, knowing that part of him was keeping someone else alive. The agreement prohibited contact. Marcus honored it. He deleted Eleanor's name from his search history. He avoided news stories about the Whitmore family. He focused on graduation, on keeping his grades up, on helping his sister with her homework, on surviving each day. 4 months after the surgery, Marcus collapsed at work. One moment he was restocking shelves, the next he was on the floor, his manager calling an ambulance. The doctors ran tests and determined his remaining kidney was struggling with the increased workload. Nothing catastrophic, but concerning. He needed to rest more, drink more water, avoid certain foods, reduce stress. Rest more. The advice was almost funny. Marcus worked 40 hours a week while finishing high school. Rest was a luxury for people who could afford it. He was released from the hospital with new medications and stern warnings about taking care of himself. The bills from this emergency room visit weren't covered by Bernard Whitmore's agreement. They would be added to the pile of debt his family carried like chains. Marcus walked home from the hospital because he couldn't afford the taxi fare. It was February, cold and gray, the kind of day where the sky pressed down heavy and oppressive. His side ached. His head throbbed. He felt 17 going on 70, worn down by choices that shouldn't have been his to make. He thought about Eleanor in her private hospital room, reading philosophy books and recovering in comfort. He thought about the agreement he'd signed, the boundaries he'd been paid to respect. He thought about Bernard Whitmore's calculating eyes and the casual way he'd turned a life-saving transplant into a business transaction. Marcus didn't regret saving Eleanor's life, but he was beginning to understand the true cost of his choice.
Eleanor Whitmore returned to school 5 months after the transplant. Her private academy welcomed her back with a special assembly celebrating her recovery and courage. The headmaster gave a speech about perseverance. Eleanor's classmates stood and applauded. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, Eleanor felt hollow. She'd gained weight back during recovery. Her color had returned. Her energy had stabilized. The anti-rejection medications made her slightly nauseous and required constant monitoring. But overall, the transplant had been a miraculous success. She was alive. She had a future. She should have been grateful. But something gnawed at her, a question that refused to be silenced. Where was Marcus Thompson? Her father had explained the situation carefully. The donor preferred to remain anonymous. He'd been compensated generously. He'd signed an agreement. It was better for everyone. Cleaner this way. No complications or obligations. Eleanor had accepted this explanation initially. But as the months passed and her strength returned, she found herself thinking about the boy who'd saved her life. She remembered their brief conversation before the surgery, the directness of his questions, the quiet strength in his eyes. He hadn't treated her like a fragile billionaire's daughter. He'd treated her like a person. She tried asking her father for more information. Bernard dismissed her questions with practiced ease, redirecting conversations, assuring her everything had been handled appropriately. But Eleanor had spent her whole life watching her father manipulate situations to his advantage. She recognized the signs. 6 months after the transplant, Eleanor began her own investigation. It started small, searching hospital records her father's secretary had left on the home office desk. She found a name: Marcus Thompson. A birth date, an address in the south side of the city. The internet provided more information. She found his social media profiles, though he rarely posted. There were a few pictures. Him with his mother and younger sister at a park, him in his grocery store uniform, him holding a trophy from a middle school science fair. She studied these glimpses into his world, trying to understand the person who'd given her part of himself. Eleanor's best friend, Melissa, caught her scrolling through Marcus's profile one day at lunch. "Who's that?" Melissa asked, leaning over to look. "No one," Eleanor said quickly, closing the laptop. "Doesn't look like no one." "You've been weird for weeks, Elle. What's going on?" Eleanor hadn't told anyone about Marcus. The official story was that an anonymous donor had saved her life. But looking at Melissa's concerned face, she felt the words tumble out. "He's the one who gave me his kidney. His name is Marcus Thompson. He's 17. He's poor. And my father paid him to disappear from my life." Melissa's eyes widened. "He paid him? Like hush money?" "It was framed as compensation. But there was an agreement. No contact. My father said it was better that way." "And you agreed to that?" "I was barely conscious when the decisions were made," Eleanor said, frustrated. "By the time I was well enough to ask questions, everything was already arranged." "So what are you going to do?" Eleanor looked back at her laptop, at the frozen image of Marcus in his grocery store uniform. "I don't know, but I need to thank him properly. I need him to know that I see what he did. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Trust me, they'll thank you later." Eleanor found Marcus on a Saturday afternoon in March. She'd driven to the south side herself, without a driver or security, telling her parents she was studying at Melissa's house. The neighborhood made her nervous in ways she wasn't proud of admitting. The streets were poorly maintained. Many buildings looked abandoned. There was graffiti on every surface. She found the address from the hospital records. A rundown apartment complex with broken buzzers and a door that didn't lock properly. She climbed 3 flights of stairs, the walls covered in scribbled messages and old flyers. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and mildew. Eleanor knocked on apartment 3B. She heard movement inside,
Voices arguing, then footsteps approaching. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and flour on her apron. Marcus's mother. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone wary. She'd learned to be suspicious of unexpected visitors. "I'm looking for Marcus Thompson," Eleanor said. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore." The woman's expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and something harder to read. "You're the girl." "Yes. My son can't talk to you." "There was an agreement." "I know. But I didn't sign anything. And I need to see him." Marcus's mother studied her for a long moment. Eleanor tried to imagine what she saw. A rich girl in designer clothes, driving a car that cost more than this building, showing up unannounced with no understanding of boundaries or consequences. "He's at work," his mother said finally. "The gas station on 5th and Market. But if you cause him trouble, if your father comes after him because of this, I will never forgive you." "I won't cause trouble," Eleanor promised. "I just need to talk to him." The gas station was exactly as depressing as Eleanor had imagined. Fluorescent lights buzzed over cracked pavement. The air smelled like diesel and old hot dogs. Marcus stood behind the counter, wearing a uniform polo and scanning lottery tickets for an elderly customer. He looked tired, older than 18, worn down in ways that made Eleanor's chest tighten. He didn't notice her at first. She waited until the store was empty, until it was just the two of them and the hum of refrigeration units. "Marcus," she said. He looked up. For a moment, his face was blank with confusion. Then recognition flooded in, followed by panic. "Eleanor, what are you doing here? I needed to see you. You can't be here. The agreement." "I didn't sign anything," Eleanor interrupted. "And I don't care what my father arranged. You saved my life. You changed your entire future for me, and you just vanished." Marcus glanced at the security camera in the corner, clearly calculating risks. "Your father paid me. It was fair compensation." "Was it? $10,000 for a kidney? For permanently altering your health? For giving me a future? How did you?" Marcus stopped, realizing how obvious it was. She was Bernard Whitmore's daughter. She had access to everything. "I saw the hospital bills," Eleanor continued. "I know what my father paid the hospital. The surgery alone cost $300,000. The recovery, the medications, the follow-up care. But you got $10,000 and a legal agreement to stay away from me. It's more money than I'd ever seen," Marcus said quietly. "It's nothing compared to what you gave up." They stood in silence for a moment. The fluorescent lights flickered. A customer pulled up to the pump outside. "Why are you here, Eleanor?" Marcus asked. "What do you want from me?" "I want to know you. The person who saved me." "Is that so unreasonable? Your father thinks so. My father controls a lot of things, but he doesn't control me." Marcus wanted to believe her, but he'd learned the hard way that wealth always won. Power always crushed resistance. People like him didn't get happy endings with people like her. That wasn't how the world worked. But looking at Eleanor now, seeing genuine emotion in her eyes instead of polite gratitude, something inside him softened. "I can't leave work," he said. "My shift doesn't end until 11. "Then I'll wait," Eleanor said. Eleanor spent the next 6 hours in the corner of the gas station, watching Marcus work. She saw how he dealt with difficult customers with patience, how he stayed alert even when exhausted, how he efficiently managed multiple tasks simultaneously. She watched him handle a drunk man who wanted to fight, calmly de-escalating until the man stumbled away. She watched him help an elderly woman find the right medication in the pharmacy section, reading labels for her because she'd forgotten her glasses. This was nothing like her world. There was no glamour, no prestige, no comfort. Just honest work, hour after hour, for wages that could never be enough. At 11, Marcus locked up the station. He found Eleanor asleep in her chair, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, her expensive coat pulled tight against the air conditioning. He stood there for a moment, looking at her, trying to reconcile the sick girl from the hospital with this determined young woman who'd invaded his workplace. "Eleanor," he said gently, "wake up." She stirred, blinking in confusion. "What time is it?" "Late. You should go home. Your parents are probably worried." "I told them I was staying at a friend's," Eleanor said, stretching. "How was your shift?" "Long." "Same as always." They walked outside together. The city was quieter at night, the traffic thinner, the air cooler. Eleanor's car sat under a streetlight, conspicuously expensive in this neighborhood. "Can we talk?" Eleanor asked. "Just for a few minutes." Marcus nodded. They sat on the curb beside her car, an absurd image. A boy in a gas station uniform and a girl in designer clothes, sitting in a pool of orange streetlight. "Tell me about your life," Eleanor said. "Not the hospital stuff. You." So Marcus talked. He told her about his father's death, about his mother's exhaustion, about his sister's dreams of becoming a teacher. He told her about working 2 jobs while finishing school, about the impossibility of saving money, about watching his body struggle with 1 kidney. He told her about the medical bills from his collapse, about the medications he couldn't always afford, about the constant calculation of which needs took priority. Eleanor listened without interrupting. She didn't offer platitudes or solutions. She just listened, and somehow that meant more than anything else she could have done. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I'm sorry my father treated you like a transaction. I'm sorry you're still struggling. I'm sorry this is your reward for saving my life." "It's not your fault," Marcus said. "Maybe not. But I'm benefiting from your sacrifice. I'm alive because of you. That matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the occasional car pass. "Can I see you again?" Eleanor asked. "Not like this, not sneaking around, but as friends." Marcus thought about Bernard Whitmore's cold eyes, about the agreement he'd signed, about the power dynamic that made any real friendship impossible. But he also thought about how isolated he'd felt since the surgery, how no one understood what he'd done, how Eleanor was the only person who could possibly comprehend the strange intimacy of sharing an organ. "Your father won't like it," Marcus said. "My father doesn't have to like everything I do. He can make my life very difficult." "Then we'll be careful." Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't the dying girl from the hospital anymore. She wasn't just a billionaire's daughter. She was Eleanor, someone trying to understand her own life, someone reaching across an impossible divide. "Okay," Marcus said. "We can try." Comment below. Should Eleanor have respected the agreement? Or was she right to seek Marcus out? Let's debate this in the comments. They met in secret over the following months. Coffee shops far from both their neighborhoods. Public parks where they could talk without being recognized. Libraries where Eleanor helped Marcus study for his final exams. They couldn't text often. Marcus's phone was basic, and Eleanor worried about her father monitoring her communications. But they found ways. Eleanor learned about Marcus's world through these meetings. She learned about the constant anxiety of poverty, the way unexpected expenses could derail months of planning, the exhaustion that came from never being able to rest. She learned about his dreams. Small, humble dreams of community college, and maybe becoming a teacher, of buying his mother a house someday, of giving his sister better opportunities. Marcus learned about Eleanor's world through her stories. He learned about the pressure of being Bernard Whitmore's daughter, the expectations that crushed individuality, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who valued wealth over personhood. He learned about her own dreams, bigger dreams of studying philosophy, of writing, of doing something meaningful beyond managing her father's fortune. They were impossibly different, but they understood each other in ways that surprised them both. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked one afternoon in May. They were in a park on the west side, far from anyone who might recognize them. "Giving me your kidney?" Marcus considered the question. His body still struggled sometimes. He tired more easily than he should. He had to be careful about his health in ways other 18-year-olds didn't. His future was uncertain. Would his remaining kidney hold up? Would he face complications later? No one could promise anything. No, he said finally. I don't regret saving you, but I regret how your father handled it. I regret feeling like I sold part of myself instead of giving it freely. I hate that he did that to you, Eleanor said. I hate that he reduces everything to transactions. That's how he built his empire. By calculating value and maximizing profit. Is that how you see me? Part of his empire? No, Marcus said immediately. I see you as someone trying to be more than what your father made you. Eleanor smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. We're both trying to be more than what we were born into. That was the truth between them. They were both fighting against the circumstances of their birth. Marcus fighting poverty and limitation. Eleanor fighting wealth and control. Their struggles looked different, but felt similar. In June, Eleanor graduated from her academy. The ceremony was elaborate. Speeches, musical performances, scholarships announced. Eleanor gave the valedictorian address, talking about second chances and gratitude without mentioning Marcus by name. He watched on a live stream from his phone during his break at the grocery store, feeling proud and distant simultaneously. Marcus's own graduation was smaller, held in a school gym with folding chairs and a single projector that kept malfunctioning. His mother and sister attended, taking pictures with a camera phone. He received his diploma with decent grades despite everything, despite the surgery and recovery, despite working 40 hours a week. His teachers congratulated him, told him he should be proud, told him he had a bright future. Marcus accepted their praise, but didn't believe it. Bright futures required opportunities and resources he didn't have. After graduation, Marcus increased his hours at work. He'd been accepted to community college with some financial aid, but it wasn't enough. He needed to save money for books and fees. His mother's hours had been cut at the laundry service. His sister needed new shoes. The cycle of poverty continued regardless of diplomas or accomplishments. Eleanor started attending university events, preparing for her freshman year at an Ivy League school. Her father expected her to study business and economics, to prepare to take over his empire eventually. Eleanor wanted to study philosophy and literature, to understand human nature and meaning. They compromised. She would double major, keeping one foot in her father's world while exploring her own interests. Their meetings became less frequent as summer progressed. Eleanor traveled with her family to Martha's Vineyard, to the Hamptons, to Europe. Marcus worked double shifts and tried to save money. They texted when they could, brief messages that felt inadequate but necessary. How's the grocery store? Eleanor would ask. Same as always. How's France? Beautiful and boring. I miss real conversations. That's what happens when you hang out with billionaires. Present company excluded, obviously. Obviously. In August, Bernard Whitmore discovered the ongoing contact. If you're getting emotional, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Marcus was restocking the dairy section when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Marcus Thompson. The voice was cold, professional, unmistakably Bernard Whitmore. Yes, I thought we had an agreement. Marcus's stomach dropped. He looked around the grocery store, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus lied. Don't insult me. I know you've been meeting with my daughter. I know about the coffee shops, the parks, the text messages. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Eleanor reached out to me. I didn't violate anything. You violated the spirit of our arrangement. I paid you to stay away from my daughter. I paid you to let her move on with her life. She's an adult. She makes her own decisions. Bernard laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you think? That Eleanor's decisions are her own? She's my daughter. Everything she has, everything she is, exists because of me. And I will not let some opportunistic kid with a savior complex ruin her future. I'm not trying to ruin anything. We're just friends. Friends. Bernard repeated, making the words sound obscene. You want to be friends with my daughter. You, a grocery store clerk with one kidney and no prospects. You think that's a friendship of equals? The words cut deeper than Marcus expected. He'd known the power imbalance existed. But hearing it stated so bluntly, hearing his worth reduced to his job and his limitations, made something inside him crack. What do you want? Marcus asked. I want you to end this. Stop seeing Eleanor. Stop texting her. Stop existing in her life. And if I don't, then I make your life very difficult. The hospital where? Continue. 010. You had your surgery. I'm on the board. Those medical bills from your collapse. I can make sure they get sent to collections. Your mother's jobs? I know the owners of both companies. Your sister's scholarship applications for high school? I have friends on those committees. Marcus felt cold despite the summer heat. You'd destroy my family over this? I'd protect mine, Bernard corrected. Eleanor has a future ahead of her. University, graduate school, eventually taking over my company. She'll marry someone appropriate, someone from our world. She doesn't need complications from a boy she'll forget about in 6 months. You don't know her at all, Marcus said. If you did, you'd know she's not interested in your version of her future. She's 18. She thinks she knows what she wants. But I know what's best for her. I always have. Bernard paused, letting the silence stretch. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but somehow more menacing. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to send Eleanor a message. You're going to tell her you can't see her anymore. You're going to be honest. Tell her our worlds are too different, that you need to focus on your own future. Make it believable. If you do this cleanly, I'll pay for your community college tuition. Full ride. Consider it additional compensation for the kidney and for walking away now. And if I tell Eleanor about this conversation, then I destroy everything you care about. Slowly, methodically, I'll make sure you understand exactly how powerless you are. The call ended. Marcus stood in the dairy aisle, holding his phone, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Around him, shoppers continued their routines, oblivious to the conversation that had just collapsed his world.
He thought about his mother's exhausted face, his sister's dreams of a better education, the pile of medical bills on their kitchen counter, the cost of community college books he couldn't afford. Bernard Whitmore held all the power. He always had. That night, Marcus sent Eleanor a message. I don't think we should keep meeting. Our worlds are too different. I need to focus on my future. I'm sorry. Eleanor's response came immediately. What happened? Did my father call you? Marcus stared at the message for 10 minutes before replying. It's not about your father. It's about reality. You're going to an Ivy League school. I'm working at a grocery store. This was never going to work. That's not true. Marcus, talk to me. What did he say to you? But Marcus didn't respond. He turned off his phone and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hating Bernard Whitmore, and hating himself more for giving in to the threats. But what choice did he have? Power always won. Money always crushed resistance. Eleanor tried calling the next day. Marcus didn't answer. She tried the day after that. Marcus blocked her number. She showed up at the gas station, but Marcus had already told his manager he couldn't work those shifts anymore, citing health concerns. She tried the grocery store, but Marcus hid in the back room until she left. After a week, Eleanor stopped trying. Marcus told himself this was better for everyone. Eleanor would go to university, meet people from her own world, and eventually forget about him. He would work, go to community college if Bernard kept his promise about the tuition, and build whatever life he could with one kidney and no illusions about justice. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, Marcus thought about their conversations in parks and coffee shops. He thought about how Eleanor listened to him, really listened, in a way no one else ever had. He thought about how she'd made him feel seen despite all the differences between them. He thought about the kidney inside her, keeping her alive, a permanent reminder that they were connected in ways that no agreement or threat could truly sever. Keep watching. The story is about to explode in ways you won't expect. Fall arrived. Eleanor started university. Marcus received an unexpected letter from Bernard Whitmore. A scholarship fund had been established in his name, covering his community college tuition and books. The letter included no explanation, but the message was clear. Payment for services rendered. Payment for staying away. Marcus accepted it because refusing would be stupid. His family needed the help. His future needed the education. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. Community college was different from what Marcus expected. His classmates were diverse. Older adults returning to school, immigrants working multiple jobs, young people like him who couldn't afford four-year universities. Everyone struggled with something. Everyone worked while studying. There was a solidarity and shared hardship that Marcus found comforting. He took classes in biology and chemistry, thinking vaguely about nursing or medical technology. Fields where he could help people, where his experience with hospitals might mean something. His professors noticed his dedication, his intelligence, his habit of staying after class to ask questions. You should consider transferring to a four-year university. His chemistry professor told him in October. You're too talented to stop at an associate degree. Marcus didn't mention the scholarship was only for 2 years. He didn't mention the looming debt. He didn't mention that community college itself felt like an impossible luxury, one he'd been threatened into accepting. Eleanor, meanwhile, struggled at university. The academics were fine. She'd always been smart, always excelled at coursework. But everything else felt hollow. Her roommate was the daughter of a senator, more interested in social connections than actual learning. Her classmates came from wealth and privilege, treating university like an extended vacation with occasional classes. The philosophy department interested her, but even there, the discussions felt academic and distant, lacking real-world application. She thought about Marcus constantly. Wondered how he was doing. Wondered if he'd started college. Wondered if he thought about her. She'd tried to respect his request for distance, but something about the situation felt wrong. The abruptness of his withdrawal. The finality of it. It didn't match the person she'd gotten to know. In November, Eleanor came home for Thanksgiving. The family gathered at their estate. Elaborate dinners, business discussions disguised as casual conversations, relatives comparing accomplishments and acquisitions. Eleanor felt suffocated by it all. She cornered her father in his study on the second night. "What did you say to Marcus Thompson?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Bernard looked up from his laptop, his expression carefully neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. He disappeared from my life overnight. After months of friendship, he suddenly couldn't talk to me anymore. You did something. I protected you," Bernard said simply. "That boy was using you. He saw an opportunity and took it. That's not true. Marcus never asked me for anything. He didn't have to. Just being associated with you opened doors for him. You threatened him," Eleanor said, the certainty settling into her bones. "You threatened his family. You forced him away from me." Bernard closed his laptop, giving Eleanor his full attention. His face showed no remorse, no guilt, just pragmatic certainty. "I did what was necessary. You're my daughter. You have a future that doesn't include a poor boy from the South Side, no matter how noble his kidney donation was. He's not just some poor boy. He's a person who saved my life. And I compensated him appropriately. I even paid for his education. He's fine, Eleanor. Better than fine, thanks to our intervention. You paid for his silence," Eleanor said. "You paid to control who I can be friends with. I paid to protect you from making a mistake that would complicate your life. You're 18. You think you know what you want, but you don't understand consequences yet. I understand that you're a controlling, manipulative man who treats people like assets to be managed." Bernard's expression hardened. "Watch your tone. I've given you everything. The best education, the best opportunities, the best life money can buy, including that kidney that's keeping you alive.
I've managed every detail to ensure your success. You've managed everything to ensure your control, Eleanor corrected. You can't stand the idea of me making decisions you don't approve of. When you're older, you'll understand. When you have children of your own, you'll see that protecting them sometimes means making hard choices, like threatening a boy who saved your daughter's life, like ensuring that boy doesn't become a distraction from your actual future. They stared at each other across the desk. Eleanor saw her father clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as a powerful businessman or protective parent, but as a man who measured worth in dollars and controlled outcomes through intimidation. Everything was transactional. Everyone had a price. I'm going to find him, Eleanor said. I'm going to talk to him, and you're not going to stop me. If you pursue this, I'll cut you off, Bernard warned. No more tuition payments, no more allowance, no more safety net. You'll be on your own. Maybe that's exactly what I need. Eleanor left before her father could respond. She packed her bags that night and drove back to university, but not before stopping at the Southside apartment complex. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs and knocked on door 3B. Marcus's mother answered. Her expression was wary, tired, unsurprised. He doesn't want to see you, she said. Whatever happened between you and your father, leave my son out of it. Please, Eleanor said. I just need to know he's okay. He's surviving. Same as always. That's what people like us do. I care about him. I know you don't believe me, but I do. Marcus's mother studied her for a long moment. Caring isn't enough when you come from different worlds. Your father knows that. My son knows that. Maybe it's time you learned it too. The door closed. Eleanor stood in the hallway, feeling the weight of that truth. But she refused to accept it. She'd been given a second chance at life. She wouldn't waste it living according to her father's rules. We're approaching the 9-month mark. You ready for what happens next? Make sure you're subscribed. Winter arrived cold and bitter. Marcus worked through the holidays, picking up extra shifts to help his family. His mother had been right about one thing. He was surviving. Barely, but surviving nonetheless. His community college classes continued. His health remained stable. His life moved forward in the grinding way that lives do when you have no choice but to keep moving. Eleanor threw herself into her philosophy studies. She wrote papers about ethics and justice, about social contracts and moral obligations. Her professors praised her work. But the questions she explored academically haunted her personally. What did she owe Marcus? What did he owe her? What did they owe each other beyond the simple biological fact of the transplant? In January, exactly 9 months after the surgery, Eleanor received an invitation. Her father was organizing a fundraising gala for the hospital where the transplant had occurred. A celebration of medical miracles. A chance to raise money for future transplant patients. Eleanor was expected to speak, to share her story of survival and gratitude. She accepted immediately. Not because her father wanted her to, but because she finally saw her opportunity. The gala was scheduled for late February. Eleanor had months to prepare. She worked with her father's event coordinator, reviewed the guest list, approved the menu and decorations. She drafted and revised her speech multiple times, showing the approved version to her father while keeping the real one private. Bernard seemed pleased with her cooperation. He'd worried the Thanksgiving confrontation might have permanently damaged their relationship. But Eleanor appeared to be coming around, accepting her responsibilities, embracing her role in the family business. He'd been right to handle the Marcus situation firmly. Given time, Eleanor had seen reason. What Bernard didn't know was that Eleanor had been doing her own research. She'd hired a private investigator, paid for with her own money from a trust fund her grandmother had left her that Bernard couldn't control. She'd learned about Marcus's community college attendance, his continued work at the grocery store, his health struggles. She'd learned about her father's threats, about the scholarship that was payment for silence. She'd also learned that Bernard had systematically erased Marcus from the public narrative of her survival. News stories mentioned an anonymous donor. Hospital records were sealed. Even the medical staff who'd performed the surgery had signed agreements not to discuss the donor's identity. Marcus Thompson had been thoroughly disappeared from her miracle recovery story. Eleanor spent weeks crafting her speech. Not the one her father expected. The real one. The one that would change everything. The fundraising gala was everything Bernard Whitmore excelled at organizing. The ballroom was decorated with elegant simplicity. White flowers, soft lighting, round tables with perfect place settings. The guest list included senators, CEOs, celebrities, and society columnists. Everyone who mattered in the city had been invited. The donations were already substantial before the event even began. Marcus watched the live stream from his apartment. He hadn't been invited, obviously. But the hospital was promoting the event on social media, and he found himself unable to look away. He saw Eleanor in her champagne-colored gown, saw her father's proud smile, saw the cameras and applause. It was a different universe from his own. His mother sat beside him on their worn couch. "Why are you watching this, baby? It's just going to hurt." "I know," Marcus said. But he couldn't stop. The program proceeded smoothly. Speeches from hospital administrators. A video about the transplant program's success rates. Musical performances. Then Bernard Whitmore took the stage to introduce his daughter. "9 months ago, my family faced every parent's nightmare," Bernard began, his voice perfectly modulated for the cameras. "My daughter Eleanor was dying. But through the miracle of modern medicine and the generosity of an anonymous donor, she was given a second chance. Tonight, Eleanor will share her story of survival and hope." Eleanor climbed the steps to the stage. She looked beautiful and composed, exactly what everyone expected from Bernard Whitmore's daughter. She stood at the podium, her prepared notes in front of her. The room fell silent, waiting for her inspiring story of survival. Instead, Eleanor said, "There's someone here my father never wanted me to see again." Marcus sat up straighter, his heart suddenly pounding. "Someone who gave me everything and asked for nothing." Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite the sudden tension in the room. "Someone who was erased from this story because he didn't fit the narrative my family wanted to tell." Bernard rose from his seat, his face darkening. Eleanor's mother clutched her pearls. The cameras kept rolling. "His name is Marcus Thompson," Eleanor said. "He's 18 years old. He gave me his kidney 9 months ago. He saved my life. And my father paid him to disappear." The ballroom erupted in confused murmurs. Guests looked at each other, uncertain what was happening. Bernard moved toward the stage, but security was confused about whose orders to follow. "Marcus isn't here tonight," Eleanor said. "He wasn't invited. Because his presence would remind everyone of an uncomfortable truth. That my life was saved by a poor black boy from the South Side. That the miracle my father is celebrating tonight cost Marcus his health, his future, and his dignity." She pulled out papers from behind the podium. Copies of the agreement Bernard had forced Marcus to sign, bank statements showing the $10,000 payment, medical bills from Marcus's emergency room visit months after the surgery. "My father paid Marcus $10,000 for a kidney. Then he threatened Marcus and his family to keep them silent. My life was bought for less than what my father spends on a single business dinner." "Eleanor, stop this immediately," Bernard commanded from the floor. His voice carried authority, but Eleanor didn't flinch. "I won't stop. Because Marcus deserves to have his story told. He deserves recognition for what he sacrificed. And everyone in this room deserves to know the truth about Bernard Whitmore's generosity." She looked directly at the camera. "Marcus, if you're watching this, I want you to know something. You gave me life. But you also gave me something more important. You showed me what real courage looks like. What real sacrifice means. You did it without expecting anything in return. That's more than anyone in this room, including my father, has ever done." Eleanor turned back to the audience. "I'm alive because of Marcus Thompson. I'm standing here because he chose to help a stranger at tremendous cost to himself. That's the real miracle. Not the surgery, not the medical technology, but the simple human choice to help someone who needed it. She paused, letting her words sink in. So I'm making a choice tonight too. I'm choosing truth over comfort. I'm choosing to acknowledge Marcus publicly, the way he should have been acknowledged 9 months ago. And I'm choosing to step away from my father's world, because I can't participate in a system that treats people like transactions. You're throwing away your future, Bernard called out, his voice shaking with rage and embarrassment. No, Eleanor said calmly. I'm claiming it. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own decision about what my future looks like. And it doesn't include erasing the people who saved me. She looked at the camera again. Marcus, I know you're watching. I know you don't want attention or recognition. But you deserve both. Come to the main entrance. Please. Let me thank you properly. Eleanor descended from the stage. The room was in chaos. Guests talking over each other, security unsure what to do, Bernard shouting orders that no one followed. Eleanor walked through it all with perfect composure, heading for the main entrance. Drop a comment right now. Tell me if you saw that coming. And make sure you like this video. Marcus stared at his phone screen, at Eleanor's face frozen in the live stream. His mother grabbed his arm. That girl just destroyed her relationship with her father on television. For you, I can't go there, Marcus said. It's too public, too complicated. Baby, she just gave up everything for you. The least you can do is show up. Marcus looked at his mother's face, at the certainty there. He looked at his sister, who'd been watching the whole thing with wide eyes. He looked at the television screen, at Eleanor's frozen image. Then he grabbed his jacket and ran. The taxi ride across the city felt endless. Marcus had maybe $20 in his wallet, hoped it would be enough for the fare. His heart pounded. His mind raced with possibilities and fears. What if this was a mistake? What if he was walking into another trap? What if Bernard Whitmore destroyed him for showing up? But Eleanor had publicly claimed him. She'd sacrificed her relationship with her father, her inheritance, her comfortable future. The least he could do was meet her. The hotel where the gala was held was beyond anything Marcus had experienced. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, doormen in formal uniforms. He felt acutely aware of his worn jacket, his second-hand shoes, his grocery store watch. But he walked through the entrance anyway. Eleanor was waiting in the lobby, still in her gown, her face lit up when she saw him. Marcus, she breathed. You came. You called, he said simply. They stood facing each other, surrounded by luxury neither would ever take for granted, both aware that they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'm sorry, Eleanor said. I'm sorry for what my father did to you. I'm sorry it took me this long to stand up to him. I'm sorry you were treated like a transaction instead of a hero. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said, gesturing toward the ballroom where chaos still reigned. You didn't have to give up everything. Yes, I did. Because living with the lie was worse than any consequence. And because you deserve better than to be erased from your own story. Marcus felt something break open in his chest, something he'd kept carefully locked since signing Bernard's agreement. I've thought about you every day for 9 months. Even when I tried not to. Even when I forced myself to stay away. Me too, Eleanor admitted. You're in my body, Marcus. Part of you keeps me alive every second. How could I forget that? How could I pretend you didn't matter? Behind them, Bernard Whitmore emerged from the ballroom, surrounded by lawyers and security. His face was a mask of controlled fury. Eleanor, we're leaving. Now. No, Eleanor said. I'm staying with Marcus. You're making a scene. You're embarrassing yourself and this family. I'm telling the truth. If that embarrasses you, maybe you should examine your choices. Bernard turned his attention to Marcus. You signed an agreement. You took the money.
I took the money because you threatened my family, Marcus said, finding strength he didn't know he possessed. But Eleanor didn't sign anything, and she's right. The truth matters more than your reputation. I will destroy you, Bernard promised, his voice low and venomous. You already tried, Marcus said. I'm still here. Eleanor stepped closer to Marcus, a clear alignment. Dad, you can threaten all you want. You can cut me off. You can make things difficult. You can use every bit of power you have. But you can't control me anymore. I'm done living according to your rules. You'll regret this, Bernard warned. Both of you. When the money runs out, when the reality hits, you'll regret throwing away everything for some romantic gesture. Maybe, Eleanor said. But at least it will be our choice. Our mistake. Our life. Bernard stared at his daughter for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, his entourage following. The message was clear. Eleanor was on her own. Marcus and Eleanor stood together in the lobby, aware that cameras were still recording, that the entire city would be talking about this by morning. They'd just become the center of a media storm. Their lives would never be private again. What do we do now? Marcus asked. I don't know, Eleanor admitted. I have some money from my grandmother's trust. Enough to finish university, to help you with community college. We'll figure out the rest. Your father will fight this. He won't just accept defeat. I know. But I'd rather fight with the truth on my side than live comfortably with a lie. They walked out of the hotel together, past the doorman and cameras, into the cold February night. Marcus's taxi was still waiting, the meter running up a fare he couldn't afford. Eleanor paid the driver, then paid him extra to take them both across the city. In the backseat, driving away from Bernard Whitmore's world, Eleanor reached for Marcus's hand. He took it, feeling the warmth of her fingers, the reality of her presence. 9 months ago, he'd given her part of himself. Tonight, she'd given him something equally precious. Validation, recognition, truth. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. For what? For seeing me. For making me matter. You always mattered, Eleanor said. I just made sure everyone else knew it too. The aftermath was complicated. Media coverage was intense. Some outlets praised Eleanor's courage. Others criticized her as a rebellious rich girl playing with real people's lives. Marcus became briefly famous, his face on social media, his story dissected by strangers. Some people sent him messages of support. Others accused him of using Eleanor for money. Bernard Whitmore released a statement expressing disappointment in his daughter's choices while wishing her well. Behind the scenes, he launched a legal campaign to contest Eleanor's access to her grandmother's trust, to pressure the hospital into retracting its support for the transplant story, to discredit Marcus wherever possible. But he couldn't erase the truth anymore. The video of Eleanor's speech went viral. Millions watched her stand up to her father. Millions heard Marcus's name. The story took on a life of its own, beyond Bernard's control. Eleanor withdrew from her university temporarily, unable to handle the media attention while attending classes. She moved into a modest apartment, sharing space with Marcus's family until she found something more permanent. The contrast with her previous life was stark, but she never complained. Marcus continued his community college classes. The publicity brought unexpected opportunities. A full scholarship from a medical foundation impressed by his sacrifice, speaking engagements at transplant support groups, even media interview requests. He accepted the opportunities carefully, aware that fame was temporary but education was permanent. Eleanor and Marcus navigated their new reality together. Not as romantic partners. Their relationship was more complicated than that, built on gratitude and respect and shared trauma. But as friends, genuinely this time, without secrets or power dynamics or hidden agendas. Do you think we made the right choice? Eleanor asked one evening, sitting in the small apartment she'd rented, eating cheap takeout on mismatched plates. I think we made an honest choice, Marcus said. Whether it's right, we'll find out. My father will never forgive me. Do you want his forgiveness? Eleanor considered this. I want him to understand. But I don't think he can. He's built his entire life on control and calculation. What we did defies all his logic. Maybe that's exactly why we had to do it. They sat in comfortable silence. Two young people trying to build something real in a world that preferred comfortable lies. The road ahead was uncertain. Money would be tight. Bernard would continue his pressure campaign. The media would eventually lose interest.
leaving them to deal with the consequences privately. But they had truth. They had dignity. They had each other's respect. That was worth more than any kidney, any inheritance, any comfortable lie. 6 months after the gala, Marcus stood at his community college graduation. It was small compared to Eleanor's academy ceremony. No elaborate speeches, no musical performances, just proud families and hard-working students receiving their associate degrees. His mother cried with pride. His sister cheered embarrassingly loud. Eleanor sat in the audience, applauding with genuine joy. Marcus had been accepted to a 4-year university for nursing school, with a full scholarship funded by the Medical Foundation. His health had stabilized. His remaining kidney was holding strong. He'd even gained back some of the weight he'd lost after the surgery. Eleanor had returned to her university, changed her major to social work, and was volunteering at free clinics on weekends. She'd reconciled partially with her mother, though Bernard still refused to speak to her. The trust fund from her grandmother was providing enough to live modestly while pursuing her education. She'd learned to budget, to shop at thrift stores, to appreciate the value of money earned rather than inherited. After the ceremony, they walked through the city together. It was summer, warm and alive with possibility. They passed the gas station where Marcus used to work, the grocery store where he'd collapsed, the hospital where the transplant had occurred. So much had changed in 18 months. So much was still uncertain. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked, echoing Eleanor's question from months ago. "Giving up your father's world? Every day," Eleanor admitted. "And I'd make the same choice every day. Why? Why? Because I'm living my own life now, making my own choices, failing or succeeding on my own terms. That's worth more than all my father's money." Marcus understood. He'd spent his whole life being told what he couldn't do, what wasn't possible for someone like him. But here he was, heading to nursing school, healthy and strong, with opportunities that had seemed impossible 2 years ago. They'd both sacrificed something. Marcus his kidney and health certainty, Eleanor her inheritance and family acceptance. But they'd gained something more valuable, the freedom to define themselves on their own terms. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "We keep going," Eleanor said simply. "We build the lives we want. We help people when we can. We tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." Sounds exhausting. Probably. But better than the alternative. They walked in silence for a while, two young people who'd learned that courage wasn't about grand gestures, but about small, consistent choices to do what was right instead of what was easy. "Before you go, I need you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories like this. Second, leave a comment telling me what lesson you took from Marcus and Eleanor's story. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with impossible choices. Someone who needs to remember that truth and dignity matter more than comfort and wealth." He gave her a kidney. She gave him a truth no money could buy. And together, they took back their lives. The story of Marcus Thompson and Eleanor Whitmore doesn't end with a fairy tale resolution. There was no sudden wealth, no miraculous reconciliation with Bernard, no Hollywood ending. Life remained complicated, uncertain, and challenging. But it was their life, chosen freely, lived honestly. Marcus went on to become a registered nurse, specializing in transplant patient care. He used his personal experience to help others navigate the emotional and physical challenges of organ donation and reception. He never made a fortune, but he made a difference. That mattered more. Eleanor completed her social work degree and opened a non-profit connecting low-income families with medical resources and advocacy. She worked with communities like the one Marcus came from, using her understanding of both poverty and privilege to bridge gaps others didn't know existed. She never regained her father's approval, but she earned her own respect. That mattered more. They remained close throughout their lives. Not romantic partners, but something deeper and more enduring. Friends forged through the most intimate sacrifice possible. Two people who understood what it meant to give everything and receive truth in return. Sometimes, Eleanor would place her hand over the scar where Marcus's kidney lived, feeling the pulse of life he'd given her. Sometimes, Marcus would feel phantom pain in the side where his kidney used to be, a reminder of what he'd given up and what he'd gained. They were connected in ways that transcended explanation. Biology and choice, sacrifice and gratitude, poverty and privilege meeting in the complicated middle ground of human dignity. Years later, when Marcus got married to a fellow nurse who understood his story, Eleanor was there. When Eleanor opened her third community health center, Marcus was there. They celebrated each other's victories and supported each other's struggles, two people who knew the true price of second chances. Bernard Whitmore eventually softened, marginally. He never apologized, never acknowledged his manipulation, but he sent a substantial anonymous donation to Eleanor's nonprofit. It was his way of reaching out, of admitting without words that perhaps he'd been wrong about Marcus, wrong about worth, wrong about what mattered. Eleanor accepted the donation, but not the olive branch. Some wounds couldn't be healed with money. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven without acknowledgement. She and her father maintained polite distance, meeting occasionally at family functions, keeping conversations surface level and safe. That was okay. Not every relationship could be repaired. Not every ending was happy. But some stories, the true ones, were about something more important than happiness. They were about dignity, about choice, about the courage to stand up for what was right, even when the cost was everything. Marcus and Eleanor paid that cost, and they never regretted it. Share this video. Like it. Comment below with your thoughts. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone isn't money or comfort or security. It's truth. It's recognition. It's the simple acknowledgement that they matter. Marcus gave Eleanor life. Eleanor gave Marcus dignity. And together, they proved that human worth can't be calculated in dollars, can't be controlled by power, can't be erased by convenient narratives. They proved that sometimes, the poorest person in the room has the richest heart. And sometimes, the wealthiest person needs to lose everything to find out what truly matters. This is their story. A story about sacrifice and truth, about power and dignity, about the complicated reality of living honestly in a world built on comfortable lies. He gave his kidney to save a billionaire's daughter. 9 months later, she chose him over everything. And that choice changed both their lives forever. Tell us exactly where you are watching from. Colorado, Ohio, Alaska, Jamaica, New York, Mexico, Luxembourg, or anywhere. We will really like to know. We appreciate you all for supporting our channel. Do well to subscribe, like, and share our stories. Thanks.